And the question is, how many failing states before our global civilization begins to unravel? We don't know the answer to that. We've not been here before. This is new territory for us. But against that backdrop, it's clear we need some huge changes, not fine-tuning of the system, fundamental changes, like restructuring the world energy economy, for example, shifting from fossil fuels to wind and solar, geothermal. We call this alternative to Plan A business as usual. And if we stay with business as usual for much longer, we're toast. No way that option is viable. The alternative, Plan B, calls for cutting carbon emissions 80%, not by 2050, but by 2020. Big time. We can do it. But we didn't, at the Institute, we didn't start with the question, what do we think will be politically marketable? Instead, we asked, how fast do we have to cut carbon emissions if we want to have a decent chance at saving the Greenland ice sheet? And I sort of use the Greenland ice sheet as a metaphor, because if we can't save the Greenland ice sheet, we're going to be faced with rising sea level, hundreds of millions of rising sea refugees, in short, chaos in the world. So we've got to move fast. We also, as one of the goals, have the restoration of natural systems. I mean, we have an economy that is now in the process of consuming its natural supports. Grasslands, fisheries, aquifers, forests, topsoil. I mean, this is sort of asset liquidation to finance consumption. It's not viable over the long term. So we include restoring these natural systems. It's reforestation, soil conservation, setting aside marine reserves so fisheries can recover, and so forth. We also, the other two major goals are stabilizing the population at under 8 billion and eradicating poverty. And those two go very closely together, because if we can accelerate the shift to smaller families, it makes it easier to eradicate poverty. If we can eradicate poverty, then the shift to smaller families will success. So these two trends reinforce each other. And by eradicating poverty, we're talking about universal elementary school education, for example. We're talking about rudimentary health care at the village level. And with population, of course, access to reproductive health care and family planning services. There are over 200 million women in the world today who want to plan their families, but do not have access to family planning services. That's a gap we cannot afford. It doesn't take a lot to fill it. By international standards, it's almost trivial. But the cost of not filling it is very high. The total cost for the grain restructuring, for the energy restructuring, shifting from fossil fuels to renewables, we rely primarily on tax restructuring, lowering income taxes and raising the carbon tax, and doing this over a 10-year period. No change in how much tax we pay, just tax labor less and carbon more. And that will drive the energy transition. For the other things, restoring the economy's support systems, stabilizing population, eradicating poverty, that's going to take fiscal expenditures. And it's close to $200 billion of additional expenditures per year for the world. Now, $200 billion is a lot. It's the $1.2 trillion global military budget. And we would argue, and I think one can argue convincingly now, that the real threats to our future are not some highly armed superpower, but climate change, water shortages, population growth. These are the threats to our future. It's melting mountain glaciers, not military aggression that threatens our future. But we have a security mindset from the last century where we fought 2 world wars and then a Cold War, and between the 3 of them, they took up a large part of the century. We've carried that same mindset into this century in setting our fiscal priorities. And as you work on the Hill, I think it's important to make this point that we need a fundamental restructuring of our national budget with a very substantial reduction in the military component and shifting those resources. So it's doable. It's within range. Jeffrey Sachs, economist at Columbia, has made the point many times that for the first time in history, we have the resources to eradicate poverty. It's not that big a deal. It's entirely doable if we decide we want to reorder priorities to do it. Let me talk for just a bit about cutting carbon emissions. There are 2 ways of doing it. One is to increase the efficiency of the existing use of energy, and the other is to shift to renewable, carbon-free sources of energy. We talk about lighting in, I believe, the 4.0. If we move, let me just remind you that if we go from incandescent light bulbs to compact fluorescents, we can cut electricity use 70%. If we go from incandescents to LEDs, which are now coming on the market, light-emitting diodes, the most efficient by far, and combine those with motion detectors that turn lights off when there's no one in the room, then we can cut electricity use for lighting by something like 90%. That would enable us worldwide to close 705 of the 2,400 coal-fired power plants. And it's actually a profitable thing to do. It's doable. Why not just ban the old-fashioned incandescents? We don't need them. And it takes a lot of coal to keep those inefficient lights going. Renewables. Texas now has 9,000 megawatts of wind generating capacity. It has another 40,000 plus in the construction and development and planning stages. Altogether, Texas will have, when these wind farms are finished, over 50,000 megawatts of wind generating capacity. Think 50 coal-fired power plants. These wind farms will produce more electricity than the 24 million people living in Texas can afford. It's interesting because this is Texas. This is oil country. Texas has been our leading oil producer for the last century. It's now our leading generator of electricity from wind. And what we're beginning to see is a sense of excitement developing around it. So there's a lot of oil money now going into wind. But when you invest in an oil field, you know that it's only a matter of decades till the well yields start to drop, and eventually you have to find a new oil field. Or if it's a coal mine, the seams run out, and you have to find a new coal mine. But if you invest in wind farms and the transmission facilities, you're investing in a system that can last as long as the Earth itself. I mean, obviously you have to replace parts, the bearings wear out, and the turbines and so forth. And the other exciting thing, and the reason they're so popular, wind turbines are so popular in Texas, is because one of those wind turbines would generate easily $300,000 worth of electricity a year. And ranchers get a royalty of $5,000 or $10,000 for each of those turbines on their land. If they occupy less than 1% of the land, so you can still run cattle, you can produce wheat, you can produce corn. You look at the cover of the book, what you're looking at is double cropping corn and wind. An acre devoted to corn will produce maybe $800 worth of corn, maybe. But an acre with a wind turbine on it will produce $300,000 worth of electricity. So you can see why we think wind is going to be the centerpiece of the new energy economy. What we're looking at is about 1.5 million wind turbines, 2 megawatts each, being built worldwide over the next decade to essentially back out coal. It's entirely doable. We have the technologies now. The most exciting single development in this area in the last year or two was in China last year when they announced their wind-based program. China was the latecomer to wind energy, probably a decade behind Denmark and Germany, for example. But in each of the last 5 years, they have doubled their generating capacity. And then on top of this growth, they have introduced this wind-based program, which involves the construction of 7 wind mega complexes spread around the country, each of which will have a generating capacity between 10,000 and 30,000 megawatts. Altogether, it's over 130,000 megawatts. Again, think 130 coal-fired power plants. These wind mega complexes, 130,000 megawatts, it's like building another coal-fired power plant every week for the next 2.5 years. I mean, this is big-time thinking. We've not seen thinking on this scale in anywhere else in terms of a single project. This is being coordinated by the Chinese government. Europe. It was July 12th last year. A consortium of European companies led by Munich Re Reinsurance, and including Deutsche Bank, Siemens, and several other well-known companies, announced the so-called Desert Tech, desert with an EC on the end, Desert Tech program. And this consortium is devising a strategy and a financial plan to tap the solar resources of North Africa for generation in North Africa and for export to Europe via transoceanic cable. It would then be possible to integrate the solar resources in North Africa and the wind resources of Northern Europe, including, importantly, the North Sea. What's so exciting about this is the potential. What's so interesting is that while the governments of Europe were trying to figure out what to do at Copenhagen, this consortium of companies entirely independent of governments came up with this proposal. And they've created a new organization actually to devise a strategy and develop a financial plan. Potential is huge. The Algerians, who already have completed one solar thermal natural gas hybrid plant, the Algerians point out that in their desert, they have enough harnessable solar energy to power the world economy. That sounds like a mistake. Mathematical error, but it's not. Those of you who follow the energy literature have seen the point made that the sunlight striking the Earth in 1 hour is enough to power the world economy for 1 year. A study on wind by the US-China team completed about a year ago pointed out that China's harnessable wind energy would enable the country to increase its current electricity consumption by 7-fold. The US, 3 of our 50 states, North Dakota, Kansas, and Texas, have enough harnessable wind energy to satisfy not only national electricity needs, but national energy needs. So the challenge is not to find the energy, it's there.